welcome to Music Maestros. Okay, so today we're going to be learning about Ludwig van Beethoven, who is a very famous composer, and I'm sure when we get to it you'll recognise some of his music. Beethoven was born in 1770 and lived in a town called Bonn, which at the time was in the Holy Roman Empire, which was run by Joseph II, Holy Roman Emperor. But today Bonn is actually in modern day Germany. Both Beethoven's grandfather and father were really important musicians in the court of a very important man who was kind of in charge of the area where Beethoven's family lived. And Beethoven's father actually taught the children of really important and rich people. He gave them music lessons. So yeah, that's a little bit about the beginning of Beethoven's life. Beethoven's father began teaching Beethoven himself when he was just 3 years old, and he taught him harpsichord and violin, and we'll have a listen in a minute to what a harpsichord sounds like. But it was a very, very complicated instrument and is for most people, let alone 3-year-olds. So yeah, I mean, that was just incredible. But unfortunately, Beethoven's father was really not a very nice man, and he was very, very strict. So you can imagine that this wasn't a very enjoyable time for little Beethoven. So a harpsichord looks like this and sounds like this. So just have a think about what you think about that sound, whether you like it or not. I quite like it. But like I said before, it's a really, really difficult instrument to play and learn, especially for a 3-year-old. At the age of 7, Beethoven's father decided that he would book a concert for Beethoven to perform in, because he had this huge dream that Beethoven was going to be this amazing child prodigy, just like Mozart had been. And like Mozart had launched himself into stardom and found favour in the king's court, or the empress court, sorry. And he was really loved, really popular. And so that's what Beethoven's father decided he wanted for him. So at the age of 7, this concert was booked in this huge city called Cologne, which is still in Germany. And, you know, compared to where Beethoven had grown up, this city was massive. And so this was a really big deal for little 7-year-old Beethoven, who knew that his father expected him to play and perform perfectly. Because, like we've already discussed, Beethoven's father was very, very strict and had really, really high standards. So Beethoven's father actually advertised that Beethoven was not 7 years old, but 6, to try and, you know, draw more people in and to, you know, create this idea of a child prodigy. And because of this, Beethoven was never really sure when he was actually born, even though we know now that the record said 1770, because his father kind of created this confusion around his birth date. Beethoven was always a little bit unsure. But anyway, that was just an aside. So Beethoven did perform. He performed perfectly, but the concert did not draw as much of a crowd as Beethoven's father had hoped. And so it didn't kind of launch Beethoven into immediate stardom, which obviously was not great news. And so they headed back to Bonn and back to the drawing board. So we're going to jump all the way forwards to 1808, where Beethoven was now 38 years of age. And in this time, he had many changes in his life. He had way back when he was a teenager, moved to Vienna thanks to a teacher that he had as a child into his teenage years. This teacher had pushed him to move to Vienna, where he thought he might have better opportunities as a musician, because it was the home of lots of music schools, etc. And although Beethoven didn't attend any of these music schools, he still managed to forge his own path and create music, a lot of which we still know and love today, including Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, which he completed in 1808. So this was a huge work. A symphony is a very large piece of music, usually split up into 4 or more movements. This particular symphony has 4 movements, and we're going to be looking at the first one, which is called Allegro con brio, which means fast with spirit, which pretty much sums up the piece. And yeah, each movement had a title, and that's the case for most symphonies. Each movement has a different title, so you know that you're moving into the next part of the music. So movements, that word is just a word that we use to describe each section of the work, of the overall work. So yeah, it's pretty simple. So like I said, this one has 4 movements. And the first movement, the Allegro con brio, is probably the most famous piece. I'm hoping you're going to recognise it. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually find a recording that didn't need kind of copyright and stuff. Yeah, so you'd have to go away and listen to it, which I would encourage you to do. The first movement is around 7 minutes long, but you could listen to the whole work, which again I would encourage you to do, but that's a good kind of half an hour, so that's when you probably want to put on in the background while you're doing other things. But it's a really brilliant work and well worth listening to. But that first movement, you've probably heard on the telly or maybe even in a comedy show, but the beginning of it goes like this: da 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 da, da 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 da. So have you heard it? I hope so. So this is, like I said, probably one of the most famous pieces. Even if you don't or didn't know who it was by, now you know. It's Beethoven. And that bit, that really famous bit that we all know, is called a motif. And a motif is, it can be a rhythmic or melodic pattern that is used to then be repeated throughout a piece. And you're kind of tuned into it. For Beethoven, it was basically the foundation, the building blocks of this piece of music, this particular piece. He very cleverly took that tiny bit, it's rhythmic and melodic in this case, that tiny pattern, and built a whole work around it. So it's kind of like if you've ever imagined a story or have written a story, you start off with maybe a character or a place, and then you build your story from there. That's what Beethoven did with this motif. So he used it as the foundation of the work, and then, like I said, just built it from there, which is very clever and also quite common in a lot of music, particularly from this period onwards. And you also find it a lot in films. That's really interesting. If you have a look into that one, a lot of film music will have, if you're watching a film, listen out for a theme or a pattern of music that you hear every time a particular character appears. And that will just keep repeating throughout the piece. And that's what Beethoven does here. He begins his piece with that da 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 da, and that's in a minor key. Minor keys generally make us kind of feel a bit sad, maybe a little bit scared. And with this piece, it's kind of particularly ominous, that beginning. You're kind of like, oh, what's coming next? So we have that to start with. And then it moves into a much lighter, happier piece, which is the middle section of the music. And that's in a major key. So major keys kind of make us feel a bit more happy, a bit lighter. Excuse me. Yeah, so it has a completely different feel to the beginning of the piece. And then for the end, it moves back into the da-da-da-da to finish. It, like I say, well worth a listen. Go away, listen to the whole thing, and see if you can pick out that happier middle section. And then when it goes back to the end, when you hear that motif again, you'll know that the piece is finishing. But see if you can hear the motif in that middle happy section. See if Beethoven's done anything to it there. See if you can pick that out. So interestingly, at this point in his life, Beethoven began to start losing his hearing, which, like, as a musician, is just a nightmare. But he was able to carry on writing music and play instruments. And also, despite the fact that he was losing his ability really to be a musician, he was known as the most innovative composer who is living. So usually, I suppose, like artists, sometimes composers are kind of more famous after they've died. But for Beethoven, he was really famous towards the end of his life for the way that he created music, much like Mozart. But yeah, I mean, after all of his father's pushing and being strict and trying to launch him into stardom from a very young age, Beethoven finally gets there after, a lot of ups and downs really through his life. At times when he was very sad, when he wanted to give up on music, all the way through to when he'd created all these huge works like his 5th and 6th symphonies, his 3rd symphony, which is also really famous, and his opera Fidelio, which unfortunately wasn't such a great hit, but still he did a lot to be proud of, and is still obviously a very famous composer today. Right, on your worksheet it says about going to the International Music Score Library, which is a free website where you can download any music. So just find the search bar and type in Beethoven's 5th or Beethoven Symphony No. 5, and you should get something that looks like this. And that has all the different parts on it, all the different instruments. It might be in Spanish, or not Spanish, Italian or French or something, but you'll be able to work it out. And then just have a little look using your circle of fifths, which looks complicated, but it isn't really. Using your circle of fifths page, try and work out what the key signature is. And yeah, you'll see some little symbols just here at the beginning of each stave, and you should be able to work out with your circle of fifth chart what the key is. So that's the end of the video. If you have any questions or maybe even a cool fact that you would like to tell me about, then just drop it in the comments, in the comment section on YouTube. So thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you soon.